I got into an argument with my landlord, and he informed me that I had to find a new place to live. The owner walked past me and he goes, "You should buy a house." And I said, I'm a child. How do I do that? All you need is 3% down. My 3% was going to be my commission. I went to the bank with my dad in the morning, and by the time he got home from work, I had his money back. That check was more than waiting tables. It's one of those life-affirming moments where it's like, oh shit, that's on the menu. And that was the first time in my life that someone had explained leverage of people, time, and money. I read obsessively. I try to connect the dots. I truly believe data sets you free.
Here we have, everyone. We have a very special guest. This gentleman, 20 years in the real estate market, over 4,000 homes sold, REO, retail, high and low markets, featured in Wall Street Journal, CNN, co-founded one of the largest private lending firms on the East Coast. His accomplishments are many. The one and only CEO of EXP Realty, Mr. Leo Pareja. Your first sale, Leo, netted you more than you earned than your previous year as a waiter. Tell me about that. That must have been a life-defining moment for you.
It was. So I got into an argument with my landlord during the week, and he informed me that I had to find a new place to live. I was already working at a real estate office as an assistant, basically, and I just passed my test, and I was searching the MLS for a rental. Broker owner walked past me and he goes, "You should buy a house." And I said, I'm a child. How do I do that? And he walked me down to the loan officer who was in office. She pulled my credit. I had good credit because I'd bought and paid off a car waiting tables. And she said, "You qualify for a non-occupant co-borrower loan with FHA. And you should buy a place and get your parents to co-sign you, and all you need is 3% down." And I had a real estate license, so my 3% was going to be my commission. So my dad said no, but I then convinced my mom to say yes, because that's what good Latino mama's do. And so basically I went to the bank with my dad in the morning. He gave me the 3% on $184,000, which was the purchase price I negotiated. And by the time I got home, he got home from work, I had his money back because I went to closing. I got the seller to pay all my concessions, and I earned 3% on the transaction. And that check was more than waiting tables 2 nights a week, 3 nights a week as a college student. So,
what made you get your license? Like at that point, you were waiting tables. What made you get your license?
So that was actually super interesting kind of trajectory. I graduated high school in the year 2000. So I'm a Y2K survivor, if you remember what that was like.
Of course.
And I actually, interestingly enough, I was pretty good at computer graphics in high school. And I grew up in the DC metropolitan area, which most people don't quite realize. It's like the Silicon Valley of the East, right? So right now, that's where 80% of the internet traffic on the planet goes through. It's in one county. It's called Loudoun County. Google has a complex out there. Everyone has a complex out there. And right now, people are doing 1 acre parcels at $6 million for data centers for AI. So it's going to stay the Silicon Valley of the East. But back when I was in high school, that's where WorldCom and AOL were started. So AOL, Steve Case, they're all from my hometown. Wow. And so I was at a high school job fair, and there was recruiters from WorldCom and AOL who said, based on your graphic skills, if you go to college and get a 4-year degree, we hire kids like you for $150,000 in the year 2000. So I went to George Mason University as a graphic design major. And my freshman year of college, the tech bubble blew up. And that was the first time my cheese got moved in my life. And it was funny because I thought it was the end of the world. I was like, my whole life is ruined, which was relative because, I hadn't done anything yet.
Yeah.
Versus, my whole plan, because those same jobs went from 150 to 35,000.
Oh, after the bubble burst.
In 12 months. And so I had felt like my entire plans had been destroyed, which, again, relatively funny. I read a book called Rich Dad Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. Mm-hmm. And then, more importantly, I read the sequel called Cash Flow Quadrant. And that was the first time in my life that someone had explained leverage of people, time, and money, which I come from a highly, highly educated family. Both my parents have PhDs. Both are super successful in their own right. My dad worked for the same company for 28 and a half years.
Wow, which is unheard of.
Graduated college and went to work for a company where he retired as, upper management, boss man, right? So I come from a very traditional upbringing when it comes to money and leverage and business, right? I read that book my sophomore year of college when I went to a friend's parents' house for dinner, and it fundamentally rewired my reality. It was, if you read Oscar Wilde's A Picture of Dorian Gray, right? The concept of the book is a book that changes how you feel about life. When you think about it, I think most humans traditionally are, you upskill yourself to become more value on an hourly basis, right? And so you're always limited. I made a post today on Instagram, funny enough, that says, take last year's 1099 and divide it by 2,080. And
I saw this.
Right? Mm-hmm. And I truly, truly believe in that. And so, and by the way, it's how I think about you guys, right? Like, I spend a disproportionate amount of my time doing this, which I don't know that most people who are not close to, like, you know this because you get to be in small rooms with me and you hear me more often than most.
Right.
But I believe that this is my job. I think my job is to interact with you guys on one-to-one and one-to-many, right? So like, this is one-to-one, but you'll turn it into one-to-many. In all aspects of life, I think in every opportunity, in every role, you have a dollar productive activity, and then you have stuff that fulfills the dollar productive activity. And and like, even in the rapidly changing world, like, you need to determine what is an agentic workflow versus a human, right? I actually saw a really interesting pod where it's like, we've been outsourcing jobs for 15 years that we did not ascribe the same amount of hourly value, right? And as agentic stuff kicks in, it's I think in the late, in the 1800s, there was a point in time where 80% of the U.S. workforce, or the 1700s going into the 1800s, were working in farms. 80%. And then we introduced like the plow, and then the Model T and shipping. And, there was I read a fascinating newspaper clip from Chicago right when they introduced the Model T. And if you read the description, it sounded like they were talking about cars. It was like, hey, we need to remove these toxic producing modes of transport. They were talking about horses taking shits in the middle of the street.
Right.
And how the car was going to be this clean transportation medium.
Wild.
So again, life repeats itself. I saw a carousel on Instagram that was fantastic, and I regret not saving it. And it was a quote from every generation talking shit about the previous generation. And it was obvious, like right now, boomers to millennials to Gen Alpha. Mm-hmm. But then it was like, then it jumped to the 1950s, and then the 1800s. And they found a quote from like 1300 AD of the Greeks saying that the next generation were going to ruin
the world.
Yeah.
It's nice that history repeats itself, because we say, listen, I'm Gen X. We're saying that about the I guess the kids that are going to be running the world.
I have two Gen Alphas, right? And it's funny. My wife the other day, we had an 11-year-old and a next week 9-year-old. He's 8 this week. But I don't know if you follow my wife. She's a super successful entrepreneur in her own right. She's got a consumer-facing product. And she was on a call. My daughter goes, hey, can I do this? And she goes, send me a pitch via email. Jokingly.
Yeah. And
like within a half an hour, my daughter sends an edited video is better than what you and I can produce, Daniel. Why my wife should buy her this thing for the closet. She wanted a closet organizer. Yeah. And it was like clipped, and it was her in the closet with perspective and explanation. So my wife's like, how did you do that? She goes, CapCut. I just downloaded it on my iPad. And it's like edited with voiceover and the words flying in. She's 11.
And that's my niece and nephew. Like, my niece will FaceTime me. She'll be like, and she's 10. My nephew's 13.
Well, my 11-year-old, I knew they were going to be built different when she was 3 and we were watching TV on the couch. When we still lived in Virginia, it was the basement TV. So it was a big comfy couch, kind of Northeastern style. She was laying on my chest, and she jumps up and goes up to the TV and goes like this.
No, trying to make the TV move.
She wanted to zoom in on the character on the TV, and I'm like, oh, their context is so different, right?
That's so crazy.
Or my 8-year-old, like since he was 5, I would get these long text messages from his iPad. Mm-hmm. And he just used voice to text. Like, their interaction is both physical and voice. Like, the concept of typing is like, what do you?
So this is what my sister did. They only just have phones now at My niece doesn't at 10. My nephew does at 13.
30 minutes a day. And they both have iPads with all full parental controls. They can't download anything without my fingerprint. Like not even my code. They're too smart for that. My fingerprint. Yeah. And
did you learn that the hard way?
Yeah. And my 11-year-old just went on her first field trip to Orlando because we live in Miami. And I took my butt to AT&T, and she has a watch with a phone line on it and a GPS.
Wow.
It's called Amigo for anybody who's curious. Amigo. And what you can control is the actual contact list. So it's mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, aunts, and that's it. Because it's text and voice. I just refuse to give them an actual phone. There's a bunch of data I've read that kids who get a phone before 13, it actually causes like pretty bad psychological, like anxiety-based problems. So they basically have Duolingo, a couple games, and they do have the Roblox and the games, but I have the parental settings where they're not allowed to talk to strangers. And they have approved little groups, mostly with their cousins.
Yeah. It's very much the same. My sister's a doctorate. So she understands she basically what she does is research. So she understands all of the dynamics of what you just said. So it's probably why she limits too.
It's an interesting dichotomy though, because we do need to prepare them for our digital world.
Yes, 100%.
And so like, we were feral as X and millennials. I'm the first millennial at 82. I think they call me an elder millennial because I'm more X. Yeah. I'm more X than millennial in behavior and upbringing, right? I drank water out of the hose with you. Part of the reason we're so self-sufficient is because we were feral. 8 a.m. with $3 and we'd come home at night and, we might have gone hunting for frogs in a bike trail and split a $1 cheeseburger at McDonald's. It's why we're so self-sufficient.
Yes. But also why and I always joke about this thing. It's what makes it so hard because we had life before that. We had beeper to
Nextel.
Nextel, yes. And then BlackBerry, and then what was 07 the iPhone?
Yeah, it was. Yeah. Well, if you were lucky, you were Nokia. I had the first Nokia when I was 15. That was my dad's, and I'd borrow it when we'd go out because he wanted to be able to call me. But it was pager, Nokia, Nextel, Sprint, flip phone, BlackBerry, and then 17 iPhones ago.
So this goes right into real estate agents, because a lot of them are in my world and yours, where before let's say before the tech, they don't understand tech the way a younger agent would. So
I'll interrupt you right there. I think that's a choice, because if you want a tech demo, you should call Glenn Sanford, who's 58 and technically in the baby boomer generation, and that man knows more about tech than all of us put together. Right? He single-handedly wrote the code for EXP Hub. Right, and not because he's a software engineer, because he capitalized on vibe coding. Right. Which, this is such an interesting moment in time. And again, my perspective is my perspective because I am a non-technical co-founder of a tech company. Right. I'm a smaller percentage of the universe. Most tech companies, Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk, they're technical. They're technical founders.
Yes.
I'm of the ilk of non-technical co-founder, which is smaller in Silicon Valley and unicorns. But the world is different now. I can write code now, right? With apps like Lovable or Cloud Code or Codex or Replit. Like we can go on and on.
Yeah.
I can write you a fully functioning website in about 12 minutes.
But you and which is amazing. But you have you do something very well. And I'll pat you on the back for this. You pivot very, very when you see patterns, you have the ability to pivot very, very quickly to them. Talk about that, because you've done that through your career.
Yeah. I get accused of having a crystal ball. I don't. So one is like the active behavior of pattern recognition is something I'm cognizant of, right? Like, and not because I think I'm smart. It's because that's what Tony Robbins taught me across all the books I've read. And that's what some of my favorite entrepreneurs have done, and I've researched it, right? So the way I've done it in our industry is I read everything. I read obsessively. I try to connect the dots. industry stuff, financial stuff. I understand the relationship between interest rates and the 10-year treasury versus the Fed, right? Like everyone talks about the Fed. That has nothing to do with that, right? Just understand pure supply and demand economics, right? Like understand how many, we almost have way more in common with generational booms and busts if you tie them to housing than anything else, right? Like when baby boomers peak buying years. And then there was a gap in between actually X and millennials, right? Like X is a smaller group, millennials are a bigger group. And millennials have not hit peak buying years yet. They just haven't because it's been pushed back, right?
Because of the cost of living?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. So if once upon a time, a decade ago, the average first-time home buyer was 28, now it's like 38, right?
30,
like,
yeah.
And millennials are not 38 on average yet, right? Like I'm the beginning of the generation at 42. My niece is 31, just had her first child. She hasn't bought her first house yet, and she's in the peak part of the bell curve, right? So I truly believe data sets you free, and when you can start seeing certain things. So in pattern recognition, I would say if I had one single thesis on it, it is what is a directional accurate bet, right? Like to say, okay, this is the number, right? It's like if we were on playing roulette and someone were to say, pick a number, I'd rather see when the roulette thing is spinning and then be able to say greater than X, right? Because then you can start seeing the momentum.
Oh,
right. And that's what I basically do, right? Like if I see something, like, oh, okay, that's gonna be a thing. So I can give you really concrete examples so I don't sound like I'm just saying fancy words, right? Like in 2008 changed the world for us, right? I tend to be really, really lucky is my thesis as well, which happens to be because I put myself in really cool situations, right? So I was very involved in NAREP. I founded the DC chapter. I spoke on behalf of them. I did citizen lobbying. So I'd go to Congress and argue for our rights. So like when you guys see me get on a soapbox, like it's not bullshit to me. Like I truly, I'm a true believer of this stuff. And again, I think last week I proved it again. It's like, yeah, no, I will always stick to my word, right? Like it doesn't matter how big of a pressure I get put under. I'm a true believer. I think the American dream is underpinned by home ownership, and I want as many people to experience it as possible because it is good for the neighborhoods. It's good for schools. It's good for safety of our children. And, first generation homeowners create equity that pay for that small business and put the first generation of college kids into college that change bloodlines, if you will. So it is a very real thing to me. And so by doing that, I then moved up to the national board. I've had this ability or luck to just be in rooms where I don't think I was qualified for. The biggest one was in 2012. I was on the national board of the NAREP board, the National Association of Hispanic Real Estate Professionals. And I get a call from Gary Costa, the CEO and founder. He goes, "Hey, bro, there's a meeting, an emergency meeting in DC tomorrow. I can't get there because I'm in San Diego. And like literally San Diego's not easy to fly in and out of. So you kind of need a couple days notice." He's like, he called me like 6:00. He said, "The meeting's tomorrow.
Yeah.
Can you get there?" And I'm like, "Sure." And I show up and I call him. I'm like, am I supposed to be here for real? Because I'm at the White House. And it's, the White House is not 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. Everyone knows that address. It's the Eisenhower office is off 16th Street. And I'd never been, so I didn't know what the Eisenhower address was.
I didn't know till you just told me.
And he's like, "Yeah, you're cleared. Go in there and take notes, and don't make us look bad."
Wow, boy, is this a definition of proximity is power, man.
Well, and I walk in, and it is the chief of staff for Obama. It is the CEO of Fannie, the head of FHFA, and mind you, this is like Armando Falcone. I don't know if that name sounds familiar to you, but if you look him up on YouTube, he's a legend. He was the head of OFEO who said Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae were cooking the books. And after that congressional hearing, the CFO of Freddie Mac committed suicide. Right? Like
I knew that.
It was like I was in that room.
Yeah, it's wild. Because from '05 to '07, I was working for a company that bought secondary market mortgage securities on the scratch and dent market. Yeah, with me.
So
Wild.
I was in the room and I literally heard them discussing the future of the housing of this country and like the cash windows and the access to capital. And like we boisterously debated when people it was like there were some congressmen who were like, we need to get rid of low down payment loans. Everything needs to be a 20% down loan. And I was like, hey, by the way, you do that, you topple the US economy. 0% down is a terrible idea. Like the default ratio on 0% is 10% plus.
Aren't most of those VA loans?
No, with the exception of VA. I'm talking about like the 0%, no money down, no income.
Oh, got it. The Ninas and the Ninas and the CISAs. Yeah.
Ninas, ninjas, CISAs, all that.
Sure.
But once you get to 5% down, and this is the fascinating part, the default ratio difference between 5%, 10%, 20% is 1%. The key to the formula is skin in the game is skin in the game. Like if 5% is all you got, it's as meaningful to you as putting 20% down.
20.
What I learned in that room, again, directionally accurate, they said, well, we're going to get rid of ability to repay. Like no income, no asset is never like that was poison. And so
there's no purpose for them. Like what's the upside to having that?
So the most important thing about Dodd-Frank and CFPB was ability to repay. So every loan underwritten in America was now going to have to be fully underwritten that you could afford to carry it. Makes total sense.
Sure.
But as I was sitting there, I was like, wait a second, our investors aren't going to be able to borrow money anymore from banks to flip a house.
Got it.
Because no one has the ability to carry a $600,000 house empty. And I said, I think hard money is going to become an institutional asset class. And so that's where I can bet. Well, I think the world's going that way.
And is that when you did the largest the private equity?
That's how I started a hard money lending business. So like when I started that business, it was a complete mom and pop business. And I flew to New York and I pitched hedge funds to buy my debt. They're like, Leo, no one's going to buy short-term debt. I'm like, somebody's going to. And I got a couple of people that I can't prove it, but I believe I have the first sales of short-term collateralized loans in America.
And what year was this?
2012, 13.
12, 13. Okay. So the market had started to its rebound because
Now it's funny enough, on Monday and Tuesday, the American Private Loan Association met in Miami at the Lowe's Hotel, and they had really sophisticated funds that buy this. Like it's now a true asset class.
It's an asset class. Yeah,
it did not exist in 2012, and so that's what I tend to be able to just go. Oh, that looks like it's going to be a thing.
What's one belief you think in real estate today that still most agents they're still getting that wrong?
At the end of the day, it's a people business, right? Like, it's funny enough, I've been more on a rant about the basics than ever before. So a couple of things that I think are capital T truths. One is, at the end of the day, residential real estate stores human beings, which is a different asset class, right? So industrial, multifamily, office, they all have an income valuation, right? Vacancy. So like, for example, office has been just kind of depressed since COVID. And I don't think it's coming back. Like now that I run the largest virtual company on the planet, like it's definitely not coming back. Like the concept of I'm in my house with a very nice setup and this all changed, right? Like
sure.
There is not an opportunity on the planet that gets me to get out of my house now. It just like, I genuinely can say that like, if
really?
any, oh yeah, no, because it is the quality of life increase. Like this morning, I woke up, made breakfast for my kiddos. Right?
You cannot put a dollar value on that.
No, you guys would not have me as your CEO if Glenn would have required me to move to Washington State.
And it's funny, like that's what we all strive for: is time freedom, location freedom, which we hear many people talk about.
I mean, I never heard anyone coin it like Glenn did, and I'm not sure if you've ever heard him say the concept was work on whatever, with whomever, from wherever. That was his dream. That was his goal. I actually pride myself that when someone pops up to a one-on-one and I see a different background, I'm like, where are you? They're like, oh, I'm in blah, 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 right? Like, I'm in Maine. I'm in California this week. I'm like, and there's like no judgment. Like there's no hiding your VPN or your background or turning on a green screen because you don't want the boss to know you're traveling. I don't care.
Again, it's what I strive for. It's what agents that are out there that are, in the grind are striving for. It's that, but you said it before, it's leverage. And, what's the best way to leverage, something as you get, I'm reading the book right now. I'm almost done with it. Who, not how. Who can you get to help you?
Is that Dan Martell?
Yes.
Okay.
Grinders and achievers think that we have to do everything ourselves. And it's like, no, there's a better way. Somebody can help you. And you said it before too, which is interesting, is we look at, things in terms of, is it income producing activity or is it an income servicing activity? And
you have both important. You just need to realize which one's what.
And I think agents that are in the daily grind of, they're trying to, get their business and their book up and going, are going to do both because they don't have any other choice. They're not at that place where they can pay somebody else to do, let's say, admin tasks, or go out and put a lockbox up, or somebody has to go with them to an inspection. Well, there's people you can pay to do that, and I think that a lot of them are. I mean, I just saw the stat. You probably know this. More than 7 out of 10 agents didn't even didn't have a deal last year.
See, and that's. I always see that. I'm like, show me where that came from, because you know what? We're flipped. 75% of our agents sold at least one home or more.
Let me ask you this then. Why do you think the traditional brokerage model, why is it breaking?
The broker value proposition has been changing since the 50s. So if anybody cares for a little history lesson, right? The real estate was super mom and pop forever. And the true first disruptor was Century 21 and Coldwell Banker, right? They were the first national franchise, and they kind of took off on fire. Two different founders. The fact they ended up at the same private equity acquisition later on in history is irrelevant. But those were the first two that kind of scaled all over the United States. Then in 1973, ballsy 23-year-old changed the game, and his name was Dave Lininger, right? And he showed up to every town in America and snatched the top producers and changed the game, right? Because the first model was, we make you valuable. And by the way, Coldwell Banker and C21 were the national players, but depending where you grew up, what's your hometown?
Lake Hopatcong out in West Jersey, New Jersey.
So for you and me, it was West Foster.
Okay.
Right? That's who was our dominant regional player coming up. Fox and Roach, right? Little south of you. But every market had one, right? So Dallas, I was at by Holiday. In Florida, we still have the Kai's companies. In Edina, Howard Hanna, right?
They're around me too.
Yeah. So, but those were the family-owned dominant players. And then Dave showed up and started snatching everyone's top producers, because all those brands model, especially in the 50s, 60s, 70s, were look, we make you. You get a desk, you get the phone book, you get a card, but it's our logo in color first. We're interviewing to see if you're worthy of our brand, right? And then Dave flipped the whole world upside down. Cap, you keep all the revenue, you're the brand. And he showed up to Texas in 1980 something, 83, 84, 85, one of those years, and almost put another 20-some-year-old named Gary Keller out of business, right? Snatched his top producers. Gary put the remaining agents in a room, and I've heard this story from Gary. And he said, okay, thank you for not leaving. How do I keep you? And they said, well, the $1,500 a month sounds nice. I didn't leave because I can't afford it. But if you can cap it on a split, that would be cool. So 1,500 times 12 is 18,000, 70-30 split. That's where it came from. It was a defense against Dave and Remax, right? And then they're like, we won't really want to be your partner without having to buy a franchise. It's like, okay, well, let's profit share a portion of the business if you bring me along.
Yeah.
And then, so my short story is Dave invented it, Gary improved it, and Glenn perfected it. Right?
Yeah.
Because Glenn said, okay, I don't like the franchise system. It's really cumbersome. It's 10-year agreements and lots of liability. And when I bought a KW franchise once upon a time, I was not the signer, but I was part of the cap table. We launched a market center. It was back then, again, 2002 or 3. It was
Florida?
Virginia. I grew up in Virginia. And you had to sign a 10-year deal. And, before I opened my doors, I had to commit to 10 years and then hire 3 full-time employees a market center administrator, which is an accountant, director of furniture operations, and a team leader, right? And most owners were the OPs. Versus with what Glenn invented, it's like, hey, if you help me build a business, I'll share it with you. But if you don't, that's cool. And doesn't matter either way, right? In that journey of competition, everyone keeps giving away more and more. And so we live in a business where the agents get the lion's share of the economics. If you look at gross margin out of all the companies, like we're somewhere between 6 and 8. Compass, anywhere, we're probably closer to 15, but they don't have caps, right? So, and they pay for office space, right? Like we paid out $189 million in revenue share in 2025. I bet you most of the other companies pay more than that in rent, right? So, and again, and look, we can't be all things to all people. So, like a really normal conversation I have with people is like, it'd be really cool if we had a NASCAR. It'd be really cool if we had a Super Bowl commercial. I'm like, yeah, awesome. Do you want to take it out of your half? Because I already give you half. And all of a sudden, everyone's like, we're good.
We're okay.
It's a hyper competitive business, and like this, I had strong opinions during all the NAR litigation. I'm like, who you think we collude? I think we are trying to cut each other's heads off.
Yeah.
Every single day, and again, all of us, you at the kitchen table, trying to get the listing, and me and the other guys trying to recruit you guys. So like, it's a very competitive business to try to one up each other, because that's what capitalism's about, right? And that's I frankly believe that's what actually creates a better consumer experience, right? The harder we push each other in capitalism, the better experiences you create for consumers to win.
Yes. So what do you think the next, let's say, 5 years of real estate brokerages, what do you think that looks like?
Yeah, so we're in a super interesting moment in time. And I do think the AI revolution we're experiencing is right up there with fire, right? And if you go back and check my podcast 12 months ago, I said, it's definitely the internet. Fire feels far-fetched. But I think it's actually there when you see like the cool breakthroughs we're going to get, like in medicine. Like we're going to cure Alzheimer's in the next decade.
You think so, huh?
Right, because CRISPR is going to get better, and we're going to be able to isolate specific gene markers, right? Like that's why I specifically said Alzheimer's versus cancer. Cancer seems like
I was thinking, I was going to ask you, what do you think about that? Because that's always, obviously everybody thinks about that.
I'm not a doctor, but that one seems way more complicated versus like, I've had several family members pass, and I have an uncle I'm super close to who's down to like 60 seconds with his dementia. It's really bad. And so like I have one of the gene markers. So there's like below average, average, and above average, and then there's like high risk. I am like right in the middle, which means, I cut out sugar and I sleep, because a lot of this peer review stuff I've read say, those are common traits seen in like elevated glucose plus like long-term sleep deprivation, which a lot of us live with. But like my flex is I average 7.4 hours a night every day. But like, I do believe that the advancements in the compute is going to usher in a new era. So when you ask me, super long-winded answer for like 5 years out, like I'm trying to get us through
2026. Well, then let's go to what most agents struggle with. And this just came to my mind.
Some of this is just never verbalized, right? Most of us grew up in a traditional education and or work world. If you work for someone, you have a clear requirement of what's expected of you. And if you don't do it, you normally would get a PIP and a talking to. And shortly thereafter, you're looking for new employment, right? Like
new job.
In like a matter of days, weeks, months. And the shock to the system is no one tells you what to do here in our world, right?
Do you think that's why most agents are stuck under $100,000 a year?
100%. The law of averages is a fascinating concept, right? Like I've read some statistic, like if you ask people to define average, they'll give you an accurate definition, and then you ask them if they're average, and everyone thinks they're above average, right?
Yes, I know. Yeah.
You and I are. What do you weigh?
Like 188, something like that.
Yeah. You and I are one of 80 million males who fit 5'10" to 6 feet, 170, 180, glasses and beard. And I looked it up once for a
Really?
keynote. Yeah.
What'd you look it up for?
A keynote.
A keynote. Got it. Okay.
Right. Because I said, I prescribe to a thesis that I'm remarkably average. Right. And I can give you all the definitions of why I'm remarkably average, which again, everyone then thinks I'm being funny because I've had an extraordinary life.
Yeah.
But I then carry that thought and go, well, like I also assume that in a very serious way of like, hey, when I see a big company make a move, I'm like, you know what? If their balance sheet's as big as mine and they have the same level of advisors as me, like, by the way, the leaps and bounds we're making with technology since rolling out of vibe coding, like with Glenn rebuilding the hub himself, and like just the amount of stuff you guys are getting in the next 6 to 12 months that we're building has me so excited. And at the equal amount terrified, because for me to think that I'm the only CEO executing on this stuff would be a fool's errand, because I believe I'm of average intelligence and or ability within my direct peer set of competition. Our average price point macro is exactly the average price point of the country. Our average price point in Miami is the average price point of Miami. Our average price point of San Diego is the average price point of San Diego.
Sure.
And so average commissions tied to those sales prices are average. And so what happens is in higher price point markets, we have lower per person productivity. In lower price point markets, we have higher per person productivity. Because like if you're selling, again, exaggerated $180,000 homes, you need to sell more in order to break even to feed yourself, or you go get a job.
If an agent wanted to go from, let's say they're making 100 and they want to go to 300, what would you tell them to focus on?
Like, let's go like to the etymology of words.
Okay.
We're on average, but let's just convert it to a synonym of ordinary. 100 is average. So let's use ordinary. 300 is not average.
No.
Let's call that extraordinary, right? Like, to live an extraordinary life, you have to create extraordinary behavior.
Literally had this discussion like 2 weeks ago. Two of the agents that I work with, their 25 was lower than their 24. And then when I said, well, let's go over 26, talk to me what you want to do. They gave me their goals. And I said, well, what are you going to do differently this year that is going to get them? Because you can't do the same thing last year, this year, and expect a higher result. You can't. That would be the insanity.
The same number of transactions in the marketplace, right? Like, look, if the market doubled again, we went from 4 million to 7 million, you could actually expect to double, like, because of the law of averages.
Right.
I'll one of my most, I video about this yesterday, so it's all fresh. We are in a new era, which I will call the rise of the polymath, which makes me so happy. What's one of the most famous quote? A jack of all trades,
master of none.
Finish the quote.
I don't know the end of the quote.
That's only half the quote.
Is it really?
Which is still better than a master of one. Would you say I'm versed in more than one subject?
100%.
Right. That's actually what I think makes us interesting human beings. Right. So you should be versed in a couple skill sets. Mine are communication and sales. And if you look history over hundreds and thousands of millennia, we actually mostly revere the polymaths. Da Vinci, Teddy Roosevelt, Thomas Jefferson, right? Okay. And we now live in a world where between large language models and YouTube University, you can learn anything you want on the planet. We were taught by the obsession of mastery. Malcolm Gladwell wrote Outliers and really kind of coined the 10,000 hour thesis. Do you know what it takes to get proficient at anything?
Is it 10,000 hours of study?
It's 90 days, an hour a day. Proficient is completely different than a master.
Oh, okay. Because I was like,
proficient by definition is 85%.
Where I know we're on probably a hard stop here. Let's do some rapid fire. All right. One habit that changed your life.
Consistency. I think that's my superpower.
Biggest failure that taught you the most.
Failure is the teacher. So I would say the unlock is that success is a terrible teacher. Failure is a fantastic one.
If you had to start over as a brand new agent today, what would you do in your first 90 days today?
I would, because of how I'm wired, I would use Remine and or RPR or Realist, and I would find every non-occupant owner of real estate. I would export the list by mailing address. I would find small and pop investors that have the same common mailing address for tax bill. And I would reach out to them and said, hey, I come across opportunities off market once in a while who want cash. What is your buying criteria? Can I take you out to coffee to learn more about how you buy real estate? And every investor on the planet will say yes to that question. Not can I list or can I sell your house?
Right.
And I find you an off-market opportunity that is unique and special within your buy box. And that creates the opportunity to start building a relationship.
All right. Listen, this was awesome. Thank you, Leo. Guys, we can have him on again. Maybe we'll get him on another, maybe next year. But hey, my friend, thank you for cutting out time. I really enjoyed chopping it up with you. This was awesome.
Take care. Pleasure.
Thank you. You bet.
Bye.
We're going to call. This is a commercial. Let's see what we got. Did you have an 11-unit building for sale?
We're not selling anything now.
Did you have that on the market?
Thank you.
All right, so most people would look at that and think that was a waste of time. He shut it down immediately, didn't even want to have a conversation.
He wasn't even ready to talk to me about that.
But this is actually where most deals start, not where they end. Let's break this down for a second. Number one, he said, we're not selling. That doesn't mean he's never selling. It just means right now he's not open.
We're not selling anything now.
Number two, he recognized what I was asking, so he's probably had this property on the market before, or he's getting calls.
He's probably getting pounded with phone calls.
And number three, he shut it down fast. That usually means he's getting hit up a lot.
That's not the last time I'll call him.